If I had known how that night would end, I'd have worn armor instead of silk. I was sitting in the Whitmores' formal dining room, all marble, chandeliers, and quiet judgment. Opposite me sat Cameron, my fiancé, pale and tense. To his left, his mother, Eleanor Whitmore, leaned forward with the unyielding grace of a queen preparing to crush a rebellion. Papers lay between us on the table. A prenuptial agreement, folded neatly in gilt-edged envelopes, waiting for the ink that would make me officially unworthy of their world. "Darling," Eleanor said sweetly, her voice smoother than the wine she hadn't touched, "this is simply business. We have certain family expectations." Her expectations were spelled out clearly on the thick legal document in front of me. If Cameron and I married, I'd have no claim to his inheritance, family trust, or estate. Essentially, they wanted me to sign away every potential right to his wealth, to property, even to the notion of marital equality. Cameron shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, it's not necessary." "Of course it is," she replied without glancing at him. "We take care of what's ours." The sting wasn't in her words, it was in her tone. Ours. I didn't belong inside that circle, not yet. And if she had her way, never. I looked at Cameron, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. For months he'd promised that his family would come around, that what we had was different. But love only matters when it's tested. And this was his test. My voice came out calm, too calm. "When did you plan this, Eleanor?" "Before or after sending the tailor to take my measurements." Eleanor smiled with practiced serenity. "You're clever, dear. That's what we liked about you. But you must understand, marriage is a partnership, and every partnership needs protection." I tapped the papers gently with my finger. "Protection from me, you mean?" The silence cracked like tension wire. Cameron's father, stoic, silver-haired Robert Whitmore, cleared his throat. "Our legacy has survived generations because we're careful about who carries it forward." I almost laughed. Legacy. Eleanor's smile never wavered. "You came from modest circumstances, didn't you?" "We can't afford misunderstandings." There it was. The truth behind the politeness. I studied Cameron again, hoping for a sign of defiance, loyalty, something. He stayed silent. So I signed, right there, in perfect cursive without hesitation. The pen barely trembled. When Eleanor reached for the documents, surprise flickered across her perfect face. "There," I said, "now you can relax." 3 people inhaled at once, Cameron in relief, his parents in disbelief. Eleanor blinked. "You agreed?" I pushed the pen toward her. "Of course." "You wanted control? Now you have it. Congratulations." Cameron finally exhaled and squeezed my hand. "See? Everything's fine." "Yes," I murmured, squeezing back. "Everything's perfect." Inside, though, something cold and deliberate began to settle. Because the thing about underestimating people like me is that you mistake silence for surrender. What they didn't realize was simple. I didn't need their money. I had far more of my own, and a plan that didn't just protect me. It would expose exactly what kind of kingdom the Whitmores were desperate to defend. They thought the paper gave them power. I knew how to turn it into a weapon. The wedding went ahead, grand and glittering. The kind of event that landed in society magazines. I played my part well, graceful, gracious, strategically docile. No one noticed the small differences, that I hadn't taken Cameron's last name on the invitation cards, that the business reporters misprinted my title beneath my photo, founder and CEO, Halcyon Technologies. Not that anyone in their circle would have recognized the name. Their world didn't overlap with tech startups or innovation pipelines. It would take months before they discovered that Halcyon had just secured a multi-million government defense contract. By then, the foundations of their empire would have shifted, and I'd be holding the lever. Revenge isn't chaos. It's arithmetic, and I had always been good at math. The first move came 6 months into the marriage. Eleanor prided herself on her philanthropic network. Charities, board positions, reputations built on the illusion of altruism. I knew exactly how brittle that image was. Behind her graceful press releases and public dinners were conflicts of interest and quietly redirected funds. A few discreet inquiries, some late-night digging through corporate disclosures, and I had what I needed. A cross-registered nonprofit using the same accountants as one of her husband's companies, siphoning donations into offshore holdings, all perfectly hidden unless someone knew where to look. No one suspected me, of course. I was the quiet new daughter-in-law, too grateful to question the golden cage. At family gatherings, I smiled, I poured wine, I let Eleanor offer unsolicited advice about fitting in. All the while I waited, patient as gravity. Then, one crisp September morning, I booked an appointment under a pseudonym with the same investigative journalist who'd once profiled Halcyon's tech ethics reforms. I handed her the files. "You're sure these are accurate?" she asked. "Every figure's verified," I said. "And you might want to look into the family trust records while you're at it." She studied me, sensing the layers I wasn't explaining. "Why are you doing this?" I smiled. "Because entitlement looks better under a spotlight." The story broke 3 weeks later. Whitmore family. Foundations under inquiry for financial mismanagement. Overnight, Eleanor's carefully polished image cracked. The board suspended her position, pending review. The family PR team scrambled to frame it as an accounting error. Investors whispered, old allies distanced quietly. At home, the storm brewed. Cameron paced, grieved, swore under his breath. Mom's devastated. Someone leaked confidential records. This could ruin them. I looked up from my tea, serene. "I'm sure the truth will clear everything up." He turned, searching my face. "You don't seem surprised." "Scandals rarely surprise me," I said mildly. "People make mistakes. It's human." He frowned, thrown by my calm, then headed out to field another call. I waited until the door slammed shut before whispering to the empty room, "You wanted protection, Eleanor." Consider it delivered. But I wasn't finished. The prenup they'd forced on me had one unexpected clause, a protection for their assets in case of divorce, tightly worded, leaving me independent of financial reliance. The phrasing was their armor, but also the flaw. It exempted all joint liabilities. Meaning, if Cameron's family companies collapsed, I bore no financial consequence. But since all my own enterprises operated autonomously, untouched by their holdings, any shared accounts we didn't create were solely my domain. When I proposed handling temporary investment transfers to mitigate bad press for the family name, they didn't hesitate. Desperation makes even the proud pliable. They handed me influence wrapped in gratitude, and I took it. 18 months after our marriage, tabloids described me as the stabilizing figure behind a reeling dynasty. They called me dignified, strategic, compassionate for standing by the Whitmores. Eleanor stayed silent throughout the ordeal. But whenever we were alone, her mask slipped. No more forced smiles, just quiet venom. "You think you've won, don't you?" she whispered once. "No," I said softly. "Winning implies competition. I'm just even now." Her lips thinned, eyes cold. "You won't last. You signed away your leverage." I tilted my head. "You think ink protects you from truth?" That night, I sent another file to the journalist, the trust documents this time, not forged, not edited, merely arranged to show exactly how long Eleanor had been skimming from pension grants. By morning, regulators had frozen 3 accounts. The legal storm wasn't my doing, technically. It was just math meeting consequence. When Eleanor's board expelled her, she finally broke civility. "You ruined us," she hissed across the foyer, voice sharp enough to cut marble. "No," I said, "you ruined yourself. I just stopped covering for you." And Cameron, poor Cameron, stood between us, eyes wide, realizing at last that the woman he married wasn't the one his mother thought she could manipulate. The next weeks blurred into legal counsel, property divisions, statements of separation. I didn't contest anything. I didn't have to. The prenup they'd weaponized guaranteed their losses weren't mine. By the end of the quarter, Whitmore Industries shares plummeted. Halcyon acquired one of their tech subsidiaries cleanly, legally, anonymously. Revenge, I'd learned, isn't shouting, it's ownership. I didn't see Eleanor again after the divorce finalized, though word circulated that she'd moved abroad for discretion. Cameron wrote once a short letter heavy with apology and regret. I burned it, because some things don't need revisiting once you've already reclaimed your voice. When reporters later asked me about the ordeal, I simply said, some families protect their assets. Others invest in understanding who deserves them. It became a quote people printed on conference banners. 5 years later, the world had changed again, faster, louder, more ruthless. But some things never changed. Arrogance, fear, families still mistaking control for love. Halcyon had doubled in size. The foundation we launched with the Whitmore grants had become an engine for women entrepreneurs. Hundreds of startups funded, thousands of lives changed. Every story that crossed my desk reminded me why I'd kept fighting after that dinner long ago. Power wasn't a weapon now. It was infrastructure. One chilly autumn afternoon, I returned to Oxford to speak at the annual Women in Business Initiative. The hall smelled of old wood and ambition. I'd lectured there before, but this time felt different, nostalgic maybe. During Q&A, a young woman at the back raised her hand. Her voice trembled slightly. Ms. Hart, my fiancé's family wants me to sign a prenup. I love him, but they say if I don't sign, there'll be no wedding. What would you do? A familiar hush rippled through the audience. That eager hunger people show when they sense personal truth approaching. I smiled softly. I'd ask what scares them so much, I said. The girl frowned. What do you mean? People demand control when they don't trust their own strength. If they're already that frightened of loss, a signature won't save them. It never does. So, don't sign? I paused, remembering another table, another document, another woman certain she held the upper hand. Sign, I said gently, if you choose to. But only after you've read every word, and know that even if they think they're protecting themselves, you'll still be protecting your freedom. Paper can't define worth. You can. The girl's eyes filled, a mixture of relief and realization. I saw myself in her, younger, untested, unaware yet of what true independence costs and gives back. Afterward, she approached the side of the stage to thank me. We spoke briefly, quietly. Her name was Hannah. I invited her to apply for one of Halcyon's mentorship programs. She promised she would. She did. Months later, she became one of our most impressive mentees, brilliant, decisive, unafraid to argue. She built an analytics platform that caught investors' attention within 6 months. During one of our sessions, she told me, almost shyly, they wanted me to sign it. I did. But I added my own clause, that anything I create remains mine, and that equality isn't negotiable. I smiled. Good. Her confidence made something settle inside me, a closing loop that had started years ago with my own pen stroke. Someone, somewhere, was rewriting the rules not through rebellion but through precision. That winter, I received an invitation to a private dinner hosted by the new trustees of the Whitmore Foundation. Eleanor had retired completely now. Cameron chaired only symbolically, yet the letterhead still carried the old crest. Curiosity drew me there. The dinner took place at a renovated museum hall. Familiar marble, unfamiliar tone. They'd rebranded fully, no arrogance, just quiet acknowledgement of rebuilding. Cameron greeted me with a careful smile. I thought you might not come. I almost didn't, I said. He gestured toward the long table where former rivals, journalists, and entrepreneurs mingled. It's strange, isn't it? How peace sneaks up when there's nothing left to prove. We sat, and for the first time in years, our conversation wasn't sharp or cautious. We talked about practical things, projects, policies, even humor about the past. At dessert, he set a small envelope beside my plate. What's this? Something my mother left before she died last spring. I froze slightly. Eleanor's gone? He nodded. Cancer? Quick. She asked for privacy. I unfolded the letter carefully. Her handwriting was weaker but still elegant. Evelyn, some debts can't be repaid, but they can be recognized. You were right. Legacy survives only through those strong enough to challenge it. Thank you for teaching me that humility isn't loss. It's freedom. I read it twice, the words blurring quietly. I hadn't expected grief, but it came anyway, subtle, surprising, real. Not for the woman she'd been, but for the one she almost became at the end. "Thank you," I said softly. Cameron smiled faintly. She would have told you herself if pride hadn't always driven her communication. "Pride and I were old acquaintances," I said. "We toasted silently that night, not to victory, not to forgiveness, just to understanding." Later, alone on the museum balcony, I unfolded the letter again. Moonlight traced Eleanor's final sentence. "Freedom is learning which battles end with silence." She was right. The greatest revenge is realizing you don't need it anymore. Years passed once more. Hannah became a force in tech policy. Halcyon expanded into education. My story turned into lore. Journalists recited each anniversary of my company's founding. Then, one morning, my assistant rushed in. "We received a list of honorees for next month's Global Philanthropy Awards," she said breathlessly. "Anyone interesting?" She grinned. "You're among them, for the Whitmore Halcyon Fellowship Program." I laughed softly. "Full circle." She hesitated. "They want someone to present it to you. Guess who volunteered?" I raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Cameron Whitmore." The ceremony was elegant but subdued, the world's elite pretending to be humble under stage lights. When they called my name, Cameron walked on stage holding the glass award. We met eyes briefly, decades of history condensed into one glance that said everything and asked for nothing. He handed me the award with a quiet, "You earned this." I took it, leaned to the mic, and said, "Funny. That's exactly what your mother once told me." A ripple of laughter and surprise spread through the hall. Cameron smiled, shaking his head. I continued, tone earnest now. "Power isn't inherited, it's practiced. Every day we choose whether to use it to control or to create. Tonight honors those who chose creation." Applause thundered. Under the lights, I wasn't the woman who'd once signed her rights away. I was the woman who'd turned that signature into an empire. After the event, backstage, Cameron approached. "So, still winning?" "Still building," I corrected. He hesitated. "Do you ever think it could have been different, if my family hadn't?" I met his eyes gently. "If they hadn't underestimated me, no, because then I wouldn't have had reason to become who I am." He nodded slowly. "You know, she used to say you reminded her of herself before fear made her small. I believe that." "Thank you," he said simply, "for her redemption and ours." I smiled. "Redemption was always available. You just had to sign it." He laughed quietly. Full circle again. Later that night, I found myself at Halcyon's office rooftop, city glittering below. The skyline looked sharper than it used to. Almost every tower contained someone my programs had helped. Hannah called just then. "You were incredible tonight," she said. "We're all celebrating down here." "Enjoy it," I said. "You earned it too," she laughed. "You know, I keep that signed prenup framed in my office." "Why?" "As a reminder that signatures can start empires." That caught me off guard. I smiled into the wind. Yes, they can." As dawn rose over the city, I placed Eleanor's letter in a glass box on my office wall beside a single memento, the original prenup she forced me to sign so many years ago, side by side. Two documents once meant to define me, now powerless in their frames, one symbol of control, one of release. And together, they told the only truth I ever needed, that sometimes the best revenge is simply outliving the limits they set for you, and rewriting the fine print in your own name. When visitors ask about them, I tell the story this way. "I was once told to sign or lose everything," I say. So I signed, and gained the world instead. And they always ask the same question, "How?" I smile. By remembering that even the smallest signature can rewrite history if you sign it in the right direction. The pen from that night still rests in my desk drawer, ink dried long ago. I'll never use it again. Some tools are meant only to start revolutions once, and if anyone ever again tries to corner another woman at a table and say, "Sign it or it's off," I hope they remember my story and realize that sometimes when she signs, she's not surrendering, she's waiting to win. It's strange how silence follows ruin. Once the Whitmores' fall hit the markets, it was as if the world agreed to forget them overnight. The headlines that once celebrated their galas now dissected their audit reports. Invitations stopped coming. Investors fled. Eleanor went invisible abroad allegedly, while her lawyers cleaned up what they could. And I kept building. Halcyon became something more than a company. It became a statement. Every deal executed cleanly, every project tied to measurable reform. In every room where I negotiated, someone eventually mentioned the name Whitmore's, half-whispered, as if I were another ghost of their story. They never understood that I hadn't destroyed them out of greed. I'd done it to restore something stolen. My dignity, my autonomy, the right to walk into a marriage without being measured in clauses and signatures. They'd bought protection with ink and forgotten that character leaves no paper trail. About 2 years after the divorce, an invitation arrived in Boston gold. Whitmore Foundation Gala, reopening and rebranding. Really? Curiosity made me read the small print. Proceeds to benefit small business grants for women entrepreneurs. The irony almost made me laugh aloud. I almost threw it away, but paused. Revenge wasn't always destruction. Sometimes the best way to close a story is to see how the other side ends theirs. So I RSVP'd yes. The hotel ballroom in New York sparkled as if money could bleach reputation clean. The Whitmore logo had vanished, replaced with a curated rose emblem, modern and desperate. Cameras flashed as guests drifted in. I wore black, not out of mourning, but precision. My name on the guest list caused murmurs. It always did. I spotted Cameron first. He was thinner, older, his confidence muted into politeness. When our eyes met, he gave a slow, wary nod. I nodded back, civil ghosts acknowledging each other. Eleanor appeared moments later, arm looped through a donor's. Still impeccable, but her confidence carried brittle edges. When she saw me, she froze for half a second enough. Then she smiled, the same perfect, performative smile I'd once mistaken for grace. "My dear," she said, gliding closer, "I hadn't realized you were still in New York. You invited me," I reminded her gently. "We wanted everyone to see that bridges can be rebuilt." I studied her, her diamonds flashing like armor. "Then tonight's your audience." Eleanor's gaze hardened briefly. "What do you hope to gain by coming here?" "Nothing," I said. "That's what makes it fun." They seated me at the front, next to an investor I'd met years prior, one who remembered my company's early struggles. He whispered, smiling, "So, you really are the woman who outplayed them?" "Stories exaggerate," I said, sipping champagne. "I simply corrected arithmetic." When Eleanor took the stage, applause filled the room. She launched into her speech-polished humility. Fresh beginnings, transparency, commitment to women-led enterprise. I nearly admired the perfection of her counterfeit remorse. Nearly. Halfway through, she paused to introduce the event's partnership with our foundation's new strategic ally, one of the most visionary CEOs in the tech world. "Please welcome," she said, clearly proud of her redemption narrative, "the force behind the Halcyon Initiative, Mrs. Enzes." Evelyn Hart. Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads turned. I rose gracefully, the spotlight finding me like prophecy fulfilled. Her face froze mid-smile. She hadn't known. I'd brokered the sponsorship anonymously through one of my subsidiaries, so yes, she'd invited me not as guest, but as patron. The room erupted in clapping, cameras flashing again. She extended a trembling hand, and I took it because that's what civility demanded. "Ms. Anand." "Whitmore," I said kindly into the microphone. "It's an honor to help restore the values your family once stood for. Integrity, generosity, truth, all things that never go out of fashion." A perfect pause. Then I leaned ever so slightly toward her and whispered, unheard by the audience, "Sign it, or the partnership's off." Her eyes widened. "What?" A contract lay in my hand, crisp white paper, the actual grant paperwork. "It's your foundation's endorsement letter," I murmured. "All you have to do is sign." For a long second, she stared, realizing the echo, the same demand she'd once made across a dining table. "Sign it," I repeated, "so the world sees you finally back the woman you tried to erase." The room watched, curious, photographers poised. Refusal would look catastrophic. Eleanor's hand shook as she signed. Cameras clicked furiously. Applause followed, thinking it a photo op. I smiled. Thank you. On behalf of every woman who's ever been underestimated, we'll put this to good use. Then I turned back to the crowd, radiant, poised. No anger, just victory polished into elegance. Afterward, she cornered me by the exit. You planned that? Of course, I said. You trained me well. Her voice cracked. Do you hate me that much? No, I said gently. I don't hate you at all. I just needed you to feel what I did, powerless but smiling for the cameras. Her shoulders sagged. What will you do now? Keep building. When I walked away, I left her standing under the chandelier, surrounded by applause she couldn't hear anymore. Cameron caught up with me outside. You humiliated her. She wrote that lesson herself. He looked torn still, the boy caught between two worlds. She can't survive another scandal. She will, I said softly. Women like her always do. The question is whether she'll finally learn mercy. Cameron exhaled slowly. You've changed. So have you, I said. Different directions, that's all. He hesitated, then reached into his coat and handed me something small. A folded piece of old parchment. I thought you'd want this back. It's your original signature page. The prenup, I kept it. I unfolded it. My name, then and now. Simple black ink. I smiled. You kept my freedom receipt. He looked at me, almost tenderly. You won, Eve. No, I said, tucking the paper away. I ended the game. Months later, tabloids ran flattering profiles of the Whitmore rebrand, crediting Eleanor's humility and collaboration with Halcyon's program. Nobody printed the truth, that every check her foundation issued carried my countersignature. We stayed publicly civil, even friendly, because sustained success hurts more than scandal. I wanted her reminded monthly that she survived only by signing my terms. Revenge wasn't rage anymore. It was rhythm, quiet, calculated, alive. The years softened it eventually. At conferences, when young founders asked about my origin story, I shortened it. I said I used to believe marriage was safety until I learned independence is oxygen. I told them contracts can protect assets but never integrity. Not once did I mention Eleanor's name. She became a footnote, a shadow under my victories. And one evening, at yet another gala, an older woman approached, clutching a small envelope. Eleanor. Her eyes were faintly tired but calm. I'm leaving our board, she said softly. Too old for this noise. I wanted you to have something. I opened the envelope. Inside lay a single, unsigned page blank except for a typed header, Whitmore's Family Code of Conduct, draft, no signature line. No demand, just a quiet admission written in absence. She'd finally stopped trying to own things. Thank you, I said. She managed a ghost of her old smile. You were always going to outgrow us. After she left, I stood alone near the balcony, thinking back to that first night, the wine, the pen, the impossible choice between love and pride. The Whitmores had said sign it or the wedding's off. They never expected me to sign and build an empire anyway. Sometimes, while reviewing contracts, I still hear the echo of her voice across that dining table. But now, whenever I sign my name, I understand what she never did. That ink can cage you or crown you, depending on who holds the pen. And I always hold the pen now,